The Intercollegiate
Psychedelics Network.
Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to today's presentations in the natural science category. We're now opening up the Q&A session for today's presenters. So if you have any questions now, like if you just didn't type them in the chat earlier, you can type them in now. Just to get started, we'll start with one of the questions that was asked earlier in the Q&A. And
do you want to first introduce everybody real fast who's up here?
Here, how about you just do that?
Or each of you can just introduce yourselves, tell us your name and the name of your talk, and we're really happy that you're here. You want to start, Julia? Alphabetical order.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Julia Eklund, and I did a master's thesis that I presented. When the name of my presentation was Psilocin esters, an investigation of synthetic feasibility and metabolic stability.
And Julia is one of our finalists. And my mentee. All right. Does Martin want to go next?
Hello. I'm Martin. I presented the spiking neuronal models and neurotransmitter talk. I did one last year. I applied this year, and they were like, "Do you want to be a coach?" And so Rachel is my mentee. But I wanted to give a talk to just kind of buttress it all, you know. So hopefully you enjoyed.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here again this year. So nice to see you. Let's have Pärham. Am I saying your name right?
Yeah, that's fine. Hi, I'm Pärham, and my talk was titled On Spasticity as a Safety Consideration Following the Intake of Serotonergic Psychedelic Substances in People with Spinal Cord Injury.
Thank you so much. And Rachel?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I am a sophomore undergraduate at Columbia studying cognitive science. The title of my talk was Psychedelics and Artificial Neural Networks. Psychedelics and Artificial Intelligence, how, why, and what we have to learn. And I had the great pleasure of having Martin as my mentor.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for being here. I know it's really late for some of y'all, so thank you for making the time. And yeah, we can start with our first question, which was submitted while the presentation was running for Pärham, which was for your presentation on psychedelics and spasticity in this unique population of people with paralysis. Spasms are probably problematic, but from a physiological standpoint, increased spasticity might indicate more excitable motor nerves. From the standpoint of motor excitability, do the results of your study suggest that certain psychedelic substances might have a neuromotor modulatory effect at the level of the spinal cord? Thanks.
Okay, that's an interesting question. As I interpret the question, was it that, or was the question, if I interpret it correctly, that it depends on the specific substance? Because in that case, if the question was, does it vary on the specific psychedelic substance if the motor output is stimulated, then we didn't, as I said during the presentation, we couldn't. From an ethical standpoint, inquire about the specificity about the illicit substance, because that would put the exposure or the risk of exposure at risk for the participants. So we weren't sure which specific substance that the participants were administering. I'm not sure if I got the question right, but yeah.
I mean, I think you know your research best, and that's an awesome answer. And I do want to say, as someone who was on this very panel last year, just a caveat to everybody watching and everyone listening that, of course, this is a student talk conference, and some research is research that was originally done and can be referenced and talked about in terms of things that were done in a lab or with a mentor. And some research that's being shared here is very new, novel research coming from students who are developing it on their own. So sometimes questions will just be answered with, I don't know, or speculation, and things will ever evolve and change over time as research does. So just want to put that caveat out there for anyone watching. That being said, feel free to ask whatever you want. We will answer as best as we can. And so the next question I got is for Rachel, which is, do you think AI can, in quotes, trip on psychedelics? Or perhaps a better question is there a way to model a psychedelic trip for AI? What a big question. Take it away.
It's a huge question, and it's one that I hope to explore for the rest of my academic career. So within my study, within my hypothetical project, we were looking at visual ways of modeling the experience. So we know that there are certain psychedelics that are highly visual, that are more visual than others. And those are really the ones that would be interesting sort of analogs to work with in the preliminary states of this research. I think that another interesting one could be auditory. We could look at we broke the iconography, we could look at different phrases maybe that people might perceive in the space, and then run that through different models that can pick up those patterns, and in that way sort of have the network sort of trip. But even now, just putting in, psychedelic visuals or putting in the word DMT into an image generator like DALL-E, or there's what was the one that I was using? Midjourney, right? It's producing these very psychedelic looking images. So in a way, you could say that they already are. If you were to ask ChatGPT, can we have a dialogue as if we were journeying together and we're having a very trippy conversation? The model may well be able to simulate a conversation that seems like it's occurring within psychedelic journey space. So in that way, yes. But in terms of actually modulating the weights of the different nodes of the network, visually, yes, we could have it produce those trippy images, but to actually trip and to produce novel ideas, that's the goal. That's the question that I'm asking more broadly, and I hope to address it in my research in the future.
So I have kind of a question I think could be relevant for everyone. Maybe you can all sort of answer this. What do you guys envision the next step of your research being? And, if you can take those next steps, I guess just dreaming big, what would like your ideal study or project going forward be?
Anyone can answer first, or you can go in alphabetical order, whatever you prefer.
Or we could just pick on people.
I pick on Julia.
I was just going to say that I can go first. So the next step for mine is currently writing an article about my results with aim to publish in the next few months. And then we also want to do some further investigations of the compounds ourselves. But further, if you go even more further, it needs to be done because we only tested on microsomes, like cells. So it needs to be some animal testing done to look for toxicity and also for the degradation, and finding the primary site of degradation for the compound, because I didn't present a lot about it, but it was we don't really know the primary part of degradation of the esters, and it's the same psilocybin is very stable also. So there are some says that it's a specific part of the intestine that degrades psilocybin. So that's and some say that it's in the stomach lining, but in our observations, nothing happened in the like gastric acid. So that's like what need to be done.
I mean, I think this is a bit like promo for IPN, but like normalization of the subject, the actual research itself is really important. Like it, just being able to talk to other researchers in other fields who may not be as enthusiastic about it, but who have the expertise that is required to make like gains in the actual scientific understanding is important. And then to do that, kind of interdisciplinary kind of practice as well. Like everyone is an expert in what they are, but we really want an integrative kind of idea of what all this is, from like the social to the cognitive to the perceptual to the neurochemical, and then as far down as we can find people who are down to go, basically. So in terms of next steps as a community, I think that's what we should do. So that's
we'll take all the plugs for IPN we'll get. Rachel or Pärham?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Just next steps generally, or?
It could be about your project, or maybe even for the field more broadly.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I guess I was interested in like if everybody kind of had like an ideal study that they would do, you know, based on their topic.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, well, I guess I did my thesis, like the presentation was about my thesis. So after that, we actually created this research group that hopefully will continue to do projects in psychedelic medicine. And if so, then one, future project could be to include the weaknesses or work on the weaknesses that we had in our previous project, which was, to include a broader population, maybe. So that could be a future project.
Yeah, I have a question then. Like, where is that limited? Is that limited at like the ethics board level, or is it limited at the number of participants you can kind of recruit, or is it about procuring enough? Like, from your experience, what was like
I would say depending on the amount of people that you can find with paralysis, since our research is still being niched on people with spinal cord injuries, and what do you call it? Like is it called bottleneck, or the fork in the road is finding sufficient amount of people that has or that can be included into the research, so that the results can be how do you say, generalizable, or that you can see something that you can take, or that you can rely on, so that the population isn't too narrow. And that's the problem, because there's not an abundance of people with spinal cord injury who have administered psychedelic substances. It's a very niche group of participants.
That's just an example of all of y'all can talk to each other too about each other's research. So feel free to do so. Thanks for modeling that, Martin. And we have another question in the chat for everybody. Hey all, just a general question. As a finance major with a desire to dive into the captivating world of psychedelic science, I find myself wondering how I can get involved with this field through a traditional science background. Any thoughts or advice on where to start? I can sort of, you go ahead.
Oh yeah. I think like there's a lot of, from people I've talked to, and this is more broadly in health and medicine, not necessarily in psychedelics itself, but I am aware that it's also becoming a thing. Just the kind of the translation, because people they're going to hear psychedelic and they're going to have a lot of images. So having people on your team or that you work with who are knowledgeable and able to present and again normalize the information for people, I think that kind of helps kind of navigate the investors' waters. Like it's, and also obviously being very aware of like the regulations and like the shifting moods of regulation as well, and anticipating that. Like that's obviously, that's I guess we kind of experienced that with cannabis here in Canada. Like as we kind of legalize and expand what's allowed, businesses sort of move in a certain way, and they can kind of saturate markets and then collapse out and then have all these things. So, I mean, the scientific communication thing, I think, is the key, because then you can always stand on the science, you know, like the markets come and go, but, you know, like at least science is somewhat dealable.
Does anyone else have anything they'd share on that question? I have a few thoughts, but I want to give everyone else a chance. All right, I'll start talking and you can interrupt me if you'd like. I would point you directly to IPN, becoming a member for free, and taking our panels, our resources, our old webinars on this topic, as well as upcoming ones, because that is such an important topic in terms of people from different backgrounds, non-traditional students, people who are looking to join the field and apply their skills or develop a new skill set without a traditional science background because they found it interesting and they feel called to it. I am one of those people as well. And I mean, to sum it up, the biggest advice anyone could give you is to just start wherever you're interested in, like whatever type of science or research you're looking into, to reach out to laboratories that are doing that type of work, which I'm guessing if you're interested in the research, then you're interested in certain people who are doing the research. So reach out to them, see if you could take up some sort of position, part or full time, in their lab, gain experience doing that research, because ultimately in terms of getting into the field, it's okay if your degree was in something else. It's about gaining more experience and pivoting and crafting a story for yourself of why you pivoted, why you moved to a new field, and what you have done to immerse yourself in the field and make sure that you know what you're doing and you know what you're getting yourself into to pursue further graduate studies. So that's the TLDR of it. I would highly, again, recommend going to our resources, our webinars on doing exactly this. This is what IPN exists for. So thank you for asking that question, and we're really excited to support you. Rachel, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, on that note, and as an undergraduate, I just wanted to go back to the last question, and sort of like that you asked about, like the next steps, or like sort of setting the course for the rest of my research. If that's okay for me to go back for just a minute, sort of speak that into existence and hope that something will come back to me. I think there are two main questions that are going to drive this research. And they're really big questions, and they may not have answers, and they may have really complicated answers. But one would be like, is the psychedelic experience uniquely human? And that's really going to be the question that sort of drives, you know, can we use artificial neural networks? Can we use artificial models to produce psychedelic effects, and hopefully to produce those effects in biological brains without actually administering any psychedelics, because ultimately that's the goal, right? Reducing harm, or you know, sort of like simplifying that process for people who have neurochemistry that may not allow for that in the most graceful way. So that would be one question. And the other would really be to, in order to, you know, once we determine that question, in order to then take that step, is really to distill the psychedelic experience, which is really a huge undertaking and not one, you know, very, very, very controversial and not easy, but distilling it as much as possible in order to, right. So in my talk, I spoke about the study, the Biospawn study, where they used the toxin of a pufferfish, and they used that to sort of to mimic that experience in an artificial neural network. So we know how pufferfish poison affects biological neural models. We can describe that in qualitative and quantitative terms, but we can't really do that for psychedelics. And also determining, like, you know, what kind of dosage we would want to use, and which psychedelic exactly. I spoke about DMT, but it could really be any of them. So those will be the two questions that really guide my research in the future. And so I'm hoping either within my university or any university, or anyone listening who has similar questions, please reach out to me, because I want to work with you, and I want to, yeah, just find the right connections to put this out there. So thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing, Rachel. And I know people will be reaching out to you. We now have a question from one of our attendees, Peter, who I'm going to put on to be able to share their question.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Awesome. So I have sort of a question for both Rachel and Martin, seeing a lot of connections between both of your talks. I mean, Martin, you being the mentor, Rachel, you being the mentee. Both of you touch on the importance of different ways that we can model these substances. And Rachel, I think you touched on an important distinction of sort of biological systems as another distinct model of intelligence in processing psychedelics. I would sort of like to hear from both of you on the efficacy of models in psychedelics in comparison to your own experience as biological systems. We can get really deep into the weeds on serotonin pathways, neural networks, information nodes, etc., the science of it, but to a degree right now, we still only have the capacity to understand these substances through the human model. So I'm curious, how have your own experiences informed your models? That's sort of the root of the question.
Rachel, care to go first?
Sure. Great question. I love this question, and it's really one that I hope to continue to grapple with. I think even from an ethical standpoint, this is one that, like, we want to sort of keep the integrity of the experience. And grappling the question is like, is this uniquely human? Is this not unique? Is this, not uniquely human? The question that you're asking is really going to be the thing that I want to continue to consider as I go about this research. In my own experience, it feels wildly humanistic, and it feels very special. I think, like, special in the term, in the sense that it feels lofty, like, oh, this must be like an experience that's unique to me and unique to my kind, and this connects me to other human beings. I feel one with everything, and in a way, when you pay attention, right? So like almost as if a microscope is sort of isolating a very small piece of a huge pattern. Something about the sort of perfection and fluidity of different patterns feels almost as if it's being generated by a computer. Cognitive science is the study of looking at the mind like a computer. And so in that way, it seems very compatible with artificial intelligence technology. So I think my affinity for both of these disciplines comes from a deep appreciation of both the very uniquely human feeling and the recognition of something that is very exacting in its pattern and very very replicable, like as if it is something being produced by a non-human model. Yeah, so they both come up, and I think the question is, like, how can we integrate both of those very real perspectives in this research? That's just me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate hearing that, Martin.
Yeah, dude, that's a good question. Very thoughtful question. I think from my own experience, sober and otherwise, like the reminder that, like, embodiment is an important factor in models. So my criticism with a lot of like what is claimed as biological now is sort of like these are platonic abstractions. The ANNs aren't really sufficiently capturing enough things. So I'm always brought back to, like, the embodiment, because the experience itself is, like, surreal, right? So, like, I find it hard to believe that other things that are not structurally the same thing biologically would be able to experience a similar thing in a similar way. There was, like, a paper, it's not specific on psychedelics, but I think it was Peter Nagel or something like that. It was called What Does It Feel Like to Be a Bat, or What Does It Like to Be a Bat? So it touches on these kinds of things of like we have an idea of what it would be like for a bat to trip, but what does it mean for a bat to trip? Like, would they eat the same mushrooms? Would they eat the same thing? Like, are those the congruent mechanisms, the chemical mechanisms at play that we can call it the same thing? So coming down to embodiment is pretty important for me. And that's led me to kind of lean more towards, like, robotics research. Because if you basically say, like, our experience is sensory motor integration over time, then if we have other systems that do the same thing, how would we have to modulate those things? And then if those systems are biologically bio-inspired, designed, then if we tweak them the same way, then we should get congruent effects, right? So embodiment for me is, like, the big one, because, like, when you're just vibing out, like, can robots vibe out? Like, I don't know. But that's my answer.
Robots vibe out. Oh, thank you. I very much appreciate that. Thank you both for answering.
All right. Our next question is for Julia, which, I'm a little biased, so just take that into consideration when I'm asking my question for Julia. But actually, I have two questions. But number one is, you so poignantly shared, in my opinion, your journey coming to how you did your research, which was a lot of your lived experience, and also how ultimately your research impacts your lived experience. And so I think that's so inspiring, the way you crafted your story and the way you've navigated your academic and research career thus far, as everyone saw in your talk. So my question for you is, what advice and guidance and empowerment, or maybe considerations would you share for anyone else watching this who is thinking like, I want to be this open, I want to share, I don't know how to, I don't know if I'll be accepted, if I could be a researcher, if I can study the things I do while being myself, because you did it so well. So what would you say to those people?
Oh, that's a tough question. But I'm of the opinion that you should, if you are in an environment where people don't accept you as who you are, then you have to change the environment, because you will always find somewhere where people appreciate you for the one you are, and then you will be able to do the best. And it doesn't matter, I am soon going to start lecturing at these homes for people with autism and stuff about this, that you only have to find something that is you are good at, and combine with something that you are good at and something that is interesting you. And it doesn't matter if you find sorting like Lego bricks, you can build a career of that. It doesn't matter, as long as you are dedicated, you could become anything. And it's just stupid adults that tells you that you can only become like these works and these jobs, because they don't know. If you become the best person sorting Lego, then you will get paid a lot because you're the best. So, and I think that's what you have to have in mind. Just don't believe the people that tells you that you can't do stuff. Just try, and I think you will be surprised.
Yeah, that is a life lesson for everyone and anyone who's pursuing a path in life in general that feels hard and like they feel like they're different, but especially for the psychedelics field, because there is so much nuance and complexity in how we navigate our research, even disclosing our interest in the topic, let alone, any personal experiences we've had that have informed our interest. And, they don't take away from the other, but in the world we live in, it's hard to balance the stigma and rules that do exist and forging our own path and being ourselves. And like Julia said, having standards to not be in places that don't accept us for who we are. So thank you for being a shining example of that. And my follow-up question to you with that, and in conjunction with all of your research, is what is the ultimate impact that you hope that your findings will have on psychedelic treatment and accessibility? Because what you found is so novel, so incredible. But paint us a picture of what you hope will happen with the work you're doing.
Oh, if I can dream, my work will help it become accessible to anyone that needs this. So it shouldn't cost that much money. And they shouldn't have to go and buy some shrooms from a corner in the street or something. So because if it is accessible, then they can get a safe dose that they know what it is. And that's also important. So safe and accessible for anyone.
And that just goes to show that with that type of goal, you can go through many different modalities and disciplines of research, because one would hear that and automatically maybe think like epidemiology or, testing. And yet you are a chemist of pharmacology, all the molecular structures and all the things that go over my head. So that's beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I believe our next question is for Pärham, from an attendee that says, I've heard stories about people who healed a wide variety of physical symptoms, not just mental, from ingesting psychedelics. Given your talk about spinal cord injuries, I'm curious what you think about those stories. Is it hearsay? If not, how do you think that's happening? Is there overlap with the same mechanisms that seem to help with mental health symptoms?
Well, this is really interesting because I want to give like a multi-dimensional answer to this, and it sort of overlaps with the previous question. I just saw that I could read them and I understand them better when I saw them in text. I realized that I didn't answer the first question at all, but I'm going to try to answer this question better. Well, I'd say like, sure, it's hearsay to say that you see a bunch of, or you hear about a bunch of physiological reactions or symptoms being treated by psychedelic medicine, but it's only hearsay because there's no evidence. And as I said in my talk, and like the whole purpose, the broader purpose of my thesis was to at least do something in the sphere of psychedelic medicine and spinal cord injury, which is like when I say that there's a gap of knowledge there, it's not, I'm not exaggerating. There's like, to our knowledge, to like the knowledge of our research group, there were like close to zero evidence on psychedelic medicine being integrated with spinal cord injury patients. So to start with something, just get the ball rolling, we did this, our survey project. So, and in that project, we sort of, I guess you could say that we could prove that the people that ingested psychedelic medicine got an increase in spasms. So obviously there's a mechanism of action that allows for this. Is it a probability? I mean, it's definitely a possibility that there are a bunch of physiological reactions and symptoms being driven by psychedelic substances in people with spinal cord injury that we don't know of, obviously, because we haven't even examined it. So I mean, it's hearsay right now because there's no research being done on it. But as soon as we start researching the subject or the subjects, then we'll quickly understand, I think, that it's like this with any other subject that's under researched, that you find out that, wow, there was this gap of knowledge here, and we're quickly understanding that psychedelic medicine does a lot more than just bring about the mental health outcomes that we thought. We could see from this survey project that there seems to increase spasticity. So obviously there's some motor neuron excitability going on. What can that encompass, and what can that allow if we try to do this project or this project? It only allows for future quests. So sure, it's hearsay, but that's because there's not any research being done on it. So there's definitely, that might change in the future, definitely will change in the future.
Awesome. And I totally relate, by the way, of hearing questions versus reading them, especially when someone else is reading them and it kind of sounds robotic. I tried not to, but it's hard sometimes. So I totally empathize. I have a question for everybody about your experience with the PsychedelX process. And now that you have come out on the other side, you have done your talk, it's been aired, it's going to be out in the world very, very soon. What do you see is next for you in terms of sharing your idea, or, sharing your research in terms of science communication, or just sharing at more conferences, or pursuing projects based on this? Not like directly the steps after in terms of like publishing or whatever, but how has this process maybe changed or influenced how you're going to go forth with sharing your ideas? Go ahead, Rachel.
So my dream is for this to become a mostly student-run project. I think what I learned most through this process of PsychedelX and being involved in IPN more broadly is that so much of this is connection driven. And if you are standing just like Julia, just like Pärham, just like Martin, just like me and just like, oh my God, just like Uma and Haley, everyone, standing in your authenticity and standing in your passion and with integrity, that this is what you believe is right and this is what you believe will bring greater good to the world, there's really nothing standing in your way, and all that you need to catalyze that is just the right connections. That's what I'm taking mostly out of this. And so I hope that my talk will reach other students who have similar curiosities, who are interested in the philosophical aspect of this question, and people who are involved on the tech side and know lots about artificial neural networks and how to program them. I want to come together with those people, and I want to try to create a way to stimulate these effects in biological neural networks. Yeah, so I'm looking for organic growth. Obviously, like, I'm still an undergraduate. I still need lots of grace from lots of important people in high places to help me get into a lab. But I would love for this to be as student run as possible, and looking at specifically diversity among people of different neurologies, different abilities, and different economic backgrounds. Also, being a first generation student, it's really, really important for me to have that representation in whatever kind of work that I do. So if any of those speak to you, I hope that we can connect.
I think it speaks to everyone. Bravo. Anyone else want to share?
I'll speak since I was Rachel's mentor, and Umar, we were actually in the same group, if I recall, by Aaron, who's now doing more of this. So I think it's really kind of affirming to see kind of the activity of the whole network. I think PsychedelX, I think conferences, especially, as long as you're consistent, then you'll have a good crowd going. And then those people will eventually, do their own research project, and their research interests will grow. And as long as you're consistent about it, then you'll always be able to kind of reconnect and discuss updates and find collaboration ultimately. I think it's important for us to kind of basically, normalization is so key, right? Just basically market the shit out of IPN. I think it's really important because I'm sure there are other people who are of the same thought, of the same ilk perhaps, but they don't have that sense of there is a research community out there of both perhaps young and old who are kind of actively spending life energy to pursue these questions, and that perhaps that'll inspire I don't know, courage or foolishness, but something will come of it surely. And now that I've mentored as well, it was a pleasure. I think it's, again, for any other conference, you get what you put in. So consistency, marketing, normalization, these are all things IPN should be doing,
1000%. And it's so clear how your energy just was so infused and brought Rachel's magic out even more. So what a beautiful example. Thank you for being back here and being a talk coach too. How about the rest of y'all? What do you see for your future with sharing your research, the impact you'll have outside of purely research in academia?
Well, I can go next. So I will actually present my research as a poster at a conference in Finland. So that's really nice. And then also from psychedelics, that has made me confident to present, and that's why I will go to this homes, supporting homes for people with autism. And I think that I will hopefully I could help them to find their passion. I think that's also connected, because I don't think I would have done that if I weren't a part of psychedelics. So I think that's all I had.
That's all. That's amazing what you just said, and really just feeling empowered to own yourself as you are, your whole self, and to empower other people to do so as well. That's beautiful. And I'm so excited for everything you're going to create and share with your community, and also your poster. That's no big deal at all. Presenting this research at a conference, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you, and thank you for sharing that. And that leaves putting you in the slot, Pärham.
Yeah. No, I'm not sure what will become next of my research. I mean, this is my first experience with any sort of research, this project. So we'll see. But we started this, research group, the therapeutic psychedelic research group. So, and we have a couple of other cooperations with other universities in the US. So I'm not sure. We're regrouping after the summer. Hopefully there's some projects that we're going to be working on. So hopefully there come a bunch of, more projects on people with spinal cord injury, and just working on making that gap a bit smaller is probably just the general goal. And we'll see.
I love that. And what you're doing with sharing your research in an accessible way through your talk, through PsychedelX, is going to make such a difference. And I think that goes for everybody here who has taken the time to go through this process and really challenge themselves to, I know sometimes it feels like doing well in research is making things more complicated, but in terms of communicating it to people, it's making it less complicated, and really, sharing it, correctly, and yet still making it accessible, making it understandable, having people who care, who have lived experience with a lot of the things you're talking about, understand and resonate. So that's what you're all doing, everyone in the entire conference, particularly talking to you all today. So thank you all so much for your participation in PsychedelX. We are so proud of you. We're so grateful for your time and for answering all of these questions. I want to ask each of you to share, because this is being recorded and people are definitely going to watch this after, and they might have questions that they couldn't get answered here. So other than leaving YouTube comments that hopefully we can monitor and get to you, is there anything y'all want to share in terms of how people can connect with you, reach you, and any final words you each have? If not,
I can. Sorry, I just want to drop one thing. And I guess this is directed to the IPN uppers. We should consider like some kind of open access publication type thing, I think a lot of this research, obviously it's going to go to where the PIs have it dedicated. But if there's ever any students who want to collaborate and then like kind of make it more accessible what their work was, I think it's quite reasonable for IPN to facilitate that, because it's not like we don't have access to reviewers, right? Maybe you could have it if you really want to go for pure access, find the PIs, or a willing kind of high level PhD student. Something along those lines would be my final thought. Now that like I've experienced this whole process again, like might not let all this energy evaporate, target it towards something that people can point to and reference and be like, well, like, oh, we've been thinking about this for years, like it stands for itself at that point.
Two things. One, I know for a fact, I'm one of the directors, and another director, Alex, is here, so heard. And number two, whatever Haley wants to share on this, basically what you said is like literally what Haley thought of and is what I believe she might be working on, with a really cool name that you may or may not want to share.
At some point, it's in progress. It probably will happen next year, I'm guessing. We're thinking of trying to create some sort of book, potentially called Blotter, that's basically like a written version of PsychedelX. The first iteration of it might be just blog post, but eventually we're hoping to have something in print that's tangible, with basically just a collection of all your guys' ideas. So that will be quite exciting. So if it happens, but we're working on it. So
great minds think alike. I love that. And thank you for sharing, Martin. Does anyone else have any last thoughts or any ways they want to put out there for people to connect with them?
Yeah, I can go. I think easiest way to connect with me is through my LinkedIn, which is my name, of course.
Awesome. Thank you.
The easiest, I can go next. If anyone wants to connect with me for any reason, then the easiest way is probably through my email. That's my first name dot my second name @gmail.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Rachel, any last words? Ways to connect?
Yeah. I want to express so much gratitude to IPN and to all of you, especially to Martin, just because like I'm super new to this, and a lot of my ideas are purely theoretical, and I feel like I was just given a lot of grace in this process and felt super duper supported, and it's been like such a joy and just to be involved in this community, and I'm excited to continue to grow within and beyond this community. The best way to connect with me would be by email. It's my first name and then the first 4 letters of my last name at gmail.com. So Rachel Rums. I also have a podcast that finished its first season. It's entering its second season. It's called SOMA, which is an acronym for Stories of Modern Awakening. We do lots of stuff on psychedelic research and talking to facilitators of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. It's really great. We're going to enter our second season soon. Yeah, definitely feel free to reach out on that forum as well. So there's a website and all that.
Amazing. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your hard work. You're incredible. And thank you for answering all these questions. I know you're going to get more, so just keep tabs on the YouTube comments or we'll just reach out to you. But yeah,